Some stories hit you right in the gut because you can tell they were never meant to be fairy tales. This one, it starts like that. And I'll be honest with you, while I'm telling it, you might find yourself asking the same questions I did. Like, how much pain can one person take before they finally break? Elena's life started in a house where she was more of a shadow than a daughter. She had an older sister, glamorous and adored, the one who always got the extra slice of cake, the newest clothes, the loudest applause at every school play. Elena, she was the afterthought. And I don't say that lightly, even as a kid, she could feel it. Imagine growing up in a room where the air never quite belongs to you. That's the kind of childhood she had. By the time she was a teenager, she was already dreaming of an escape. Not because she hated her family, but because she knew she would never be enough for them. And here's the thing, when you grow up hungry for approval you'll never get, you start chasing dreams that feel impossible. For Elena, that dream was design. Clothes, colors, fabrics. She wanted to build beauty out of a life that felt so gray. But her family never let her forget her place. They told her design was a hobby, not a future. Her father literally laughed when she talked about art school. And her sister? She smirked like Elena had just admitted she wanted to join the circus. I have to pause here because imagine that, being young, having a dream, and the people who are supposed to believe in you are the ones crushing it first. That's a special kind of heartbreak. So Elena left. She packed what little she had and told herself she was going to prove them wrong. For a while, it even looked like she would. She found small jobs, assistant gigs in the city, late night sketching in tiny rented rooms, always clinging to this fragile belief that if she just worked hard enough, someone would notice. But life, as it tends to do, didn't just test her, it broke her down. One layoff, then another. Rent piling up, bills going unpaid, friends drifting away when she couldn't afford to go out anymore. And then came the night she had nowhere left to go. She was standing on a freezing corner with one bag of clothes and $20 to her name. That night was the start of what I can only call the unraveling. She slept in shelters when she could, sometimes on benches when she couldn't. And I want you to sit with that for a second. Think about how far you'd have to fall before a public bench feels safer than your own home. That's where Elena was. And did her family help? No. In fact, when they heard she was struggling, they turned their backs harder. Her father called her a disappointment. Her sister said, "I told you so." They didn't just abandon her, they rubbed salt in the wound. It was in those months, cold, hungry, stripped of dignity, that Elena learned exactly what she was worth to the people who raised her. Nothing. And if you're wondering how someone survives that kind of rejection, hold on. When I think about Elena's lowest point, I always come back to this one night. She was sitting on the floor of a women's shelter, clutching a styrofoam cup of watery coffee like it was the only thing tethering her to the world, and she overheard two women talking about jobs at a local cafe. It sounds small, right? Just some gig-making lattes? But to Elena, that conversation was oxygen. She showed up the next morning, unshowered, wearing the only clean shirt she had, and asked the manager for work. And here's the twist: he hired her, just like that. No resume, no judgment. Sometimes the universe hands you a lifeline when you least expect it. Now, I'm not going to romanticize this part. Working at a cafe didn't magically solve her life. She still struggled, still slept on couches or in borrowed corners of friends' apartments. But that job gave her something priceless. Routine. A paycheck. A sense that maybe she wasn't invisible after all. And slowly, piece by piece, Elena began rebuilding herself. She saved what she could, sketched in the back room during breaks, and started posting her designs online. At first, no one cared. But then one night, and I swear it always happens on a night when you're ready to give up, one of her sketches went viral. It wasn't some masterpiece, just a bold, messy jacket design, something raw and different. But people saw it, and they loved it. Messages started pouring in. "Do you sell this? Where can I buy?" Elena stared at her screen like it was a mirage. For the first time in her life, strangers believed in her more than her own family ever did. And here's where I pause, because this part makes me angry. How is it that the people who are supposed to lift you up are the ones who drag you down? While complete strangers on the internet are the ones who finally say, "We see you"? It's a cruel irony, but it's real. From there, things snowballed. Small commissions turned into larger ones. A boutique offered to carry her pieces. She started waking up at dawn, sewing until her fingers ached, balancing cafe shifts with midnight design sessions. I won't lie, it was brutal. But it was hers. Every stitch, every sale, every tiny victory belonged to her. And then came the moment that changed everything. She entered a design competition, just a local one, nothing huge. She almost didn't submit, because she kept hearing her father's voice in her head saying she wasn't good enough, but she did it anyway. And guess what? She won. Not just won. She blew the judges away. Suddenly, she wasn't the forgotten daughter or the failed dreamer. She was a designer with a future. Doors started opening. People wanted to work with her. She got offers, interviews, her name in places she'd only dreamed of seeing it. Now, I don't want you to think this was some Hollywood transformation where everything turned glittery overnight. It wasn't. There were still setbacks, still bills, still moments when she wanted to give up. But the difference was, she had proof now. Proof that she wasn't worthless. Proof that her vision mattered. And you want to know the most bitter part? That was right about when her family came crawling back. Oh yes, suddenly the same people who mocked her were talking about how proud they were. Her father bragged to neighbors that his daughter was in fashion. Her sister, she had the audacity to ask Elena for free clothes. And here's where I get personal, because I don't know about you, but that would have lit a fire in me. After everything, after watching her starve, they wanted to share her spotlight. It makes me sick. But Elena, she didn't snap. Not yet. She smiled. She let them talk. She gave her sister a polite, "I'll think about it." But inside, she was already planning. And trust me, that plan, that was the beginning of the end for them. Success is funny. It doesn't just change your bank account. It changes how people look at you, how they talk to you, how they suddenly remember your name. For Elena, it was intoxicating at first. After years of invisibility, people finally noticed her. She wasn't just the spare daughter anymore. She was Elena, the designer, the winner, the one who made it out. But with that success came whispers, invitations, family dinners, the kind where everyone pretends the past didn't happen. And Elena, she went along with it. At least, on the surface. She sat at that long mahogany table in her parents' house, listening to her father toast her brilliance, listening to her sister gush about Elena's incredible eye for detail. And the whole time she smiled. She smiled like a woman holding a secret no one else in the room knew. Because here's what they didn't realize. Elena hadn't just survived them. She had outgrown them. And now she was ready to let them feel what it was like to be dismissed, to be used, to be betrayed. Her first move was subtle. Remember that sister who asked for free clothes? Elena agreed, but she made her wait. Weeks passed, then months. And when her sister finally did get a piece, Elena made sure it wasn't just late, it was last season. Outdated, worthless. Oh, and delivered in the plainest brown paper bag imaginable. That might sound petty, but when someone's ego feeds on appearances, that's not just a slight, it's a knife. Then came her father, the man who told her she was just another poor girl who'd never amount to anything. Well, Elena had something for him, too. She invited him to a gala, her first big international showcase. Front row seats, champagne, cameras flashing. He thought it was his chance to bask in her glory. But Elena, she had arranged every detail with precision. When the press asked for interviews, she spoke about her inspirations, about mentors, about people who had lifted her up when no one else believed in her. She named teachers, co-workers, even strangers online. But her father's name? Not once. You could see it in his face, the realization that he was erased, that his daughter had written him out of her story. And I have to admit, when I picture that moment, I can't help but grin. Because that's the kind of revenge money can't buy. Silence. Being invisible in the narrative of the very person you once tried to silence. But the real climax? That came with her mother, the woman who never stood up for her, who watched Elena break and did nothing. One night, after a particularly glittering show, Elena went home with her mother alone. No cameras, no audience, just the two of them in that cold kitchen. Her mother tried to make small talk, tried to pretend that years of neglect could be patched over with tea and polite smiles, and Elena just looked at her and said, "Do you know what it's like to need your mother and she chooses to stay quiet? Do you know what it's like to be erased by the people who were supposed to love you?" Her mother froze. She didn't answer, and Elena, she didn't wait for one. She stood up, gathered her coat, and left. That silence was her answer. That silence was her revenge. From there, Elena never cut ties completely. Oh no, that would have been too easy. Instead, she let them linger on the edges of her world, watching as she soared higher and higher, knowing they would never truly touch her light. She gave them just enough to hope, just enough to ache, but never enough to claim her. And if you're wondering how she feels now, I'll tell you. Elena lives free. Not bitter, not broken. Free. She carries herself with the kind of calm that only comes from surviving the worst and realizing you didn't just survive, you won. And me, every time I think of her story, I think of this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting or even cutting people off. Sometimes the best revenge is living so loudly, so unapologetically, that the people who tried to destroy you are forced to sit front row while you shine. So that's Elena's story, a girl dismissed by her own family who built herself from the ashes and who rose so high they couldn't even reach her shadow. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the most satisfying arcs I've ever witnessed, because sometimes the ones who break you don't deserve the courtesy of closure. They deserve to watch. And Elena, she made sure they did.